Mental health is the foundation of any lasting relationship, and after 60, that becomes even more essential. In just 14 days, it's possible to transform your routine, bring back the sparkle in your eyes, and rediscover what truly keeps a couple together. The story you're about to hear shows it's never too late to renew love, and that with simple choices, the heart can feel young again. Sparkles. Mental health after 60 is crucial for keeping love alive in a couple. When John and Mary first met, it was pursuit that brought them together. Shared glances, honest words, and small gestures gave birth to a love that seemed endless. But over time, routine cast a shadow of monotony. The absence of romance created space for a quiet mental exhaustion, the kind that slowly wears down so many marriages. This is where many give up, believing love is gone, when in truth, it just needs to be reignited. The truth is, winning someone over isn't a one-time act, it's a daily practice. And the good news is, it's never too late to start over. After 60, or at any age, there's always a chance to renew love's glow and prove the heart can stay young forever. You know this when you look at John and Mary. They've always been partners, but over time, they started keeping thoughts to themselves instead of sharing them. Conversations grew short, gestures lost their meaning. Mary felt like she was speaking into emptiness. John felt like he was carrying a weight with no name. It wasn't that they lacked history, it was that they lacked care for what the mind holds and what the heart interprets. This channel is new and brings real-life lessons, like the story of John and Mary, who proved it's never too late to begin again. Support our growth on YouTube, subscribe, leave a like, share, and don't miss our next videos. One night, Mary tried to start a conversation about an old birthday memory. John replied with a curt phrase and went back to his newspaper. It wasn't coldness, it was mental fatigue, a kind of fog that blurs priorities. She quietly cleared the dishes and, for a few minutes, thought love had shrunk. Then she took a deep breath and decided to focus on what depended on her, organizing her thoughts, calming her anxiety, choosing better words. The next day, Mary opened the photo box. Among clippings and letters, she found a note from decades ago, written by John before a business trip. "I'll come back with twice the longing." That warmed something inside her. It was a small beginning, middle, and end all within that same afternoon. It started with longing, led to discovery, and ended with a brief but sincere smile. No speeches, just the reminder that the mind holds keys to doors that seemed locked. Days later, at the neighborhood clinic, Mary read a pamphlet, "Caring for Your Mind Helps Strengthen Bonds After 60." Simple and direct. It talked about regular sleep, crossword puzzles, honest conversations, and daily gratitude. Nothing fancy. She underlined the sentence with a pen and carried the paper in her purse, like someone holding a reminder of something obvious yet powerful. Mental balance sustains the affection that already exists. John also had his own small personal script. At the barbershop, a widowed friend mentioned that what he misses most is talking about simple things. "The mind needs good topics, or it invents problems," he said. John thought about all the times he chose distraction over listening. He realized he hadn't drifted away from lack of love, but from neglecting his own mind, too much rumination, too little presence. He remembered two old challenges they'd faced together, Mary's knee surgery and his unexpected layoff. In both, they succeeded because they spoke frankly, asked for help, and made short, clear plans. Fear was there, of course, but so was focus. That's mental health in practice, organizing thoughts so emotions don't turn into storms. When he got home, John watched Mary preparing coffee. He wanted to say something simple and true. Instead of searching for perfect phrases, he chose presence. He realized that caring for his mind, right there, meant 3 basic gestures: listening without rushing, thanking for what already exists, and recalling together a good moment from the past. Small choices that align thought and feeling. You can see where this touches love. When the mind finds order, the heart finds space. John and Mary still had history, memories, and desire. What they needed was to trade noise for clarity, distance for attention. Mental health at this stage of life is the foundation that stops misunderstandings from growing and keeps silence from turning into a wall. And that late afternoon, each of them understood their part in this care. No grand promises, just the decision to truly be present. Mary kept that pamphlet in her purse like someone carrying a quiet compass. At the first opportunity, she showed it to John. He read it silently and raised his eyebrows. He wasn't the kind of man who followed advice printed on half a page, but he noticed something different in her gaze: hope. And hope, after 60, is rare fuel. That's when Mary made her proposal. What if we tried something new? Small gestures, just for 2 weeks. John sighed, not very convinced, but he agreed. The challenge started shyly. On the first day, John wrote a short note by hand and left it on the pillow. "I still love seeing you smile." Mary read it in silence, as if time had rolled back decades. She tucked the paper into her keepsake box and smiled genuinely, alone, for the first time in a long while. On the second day, it was her turn to surprise him. She made the chocolate cake John always mentioned as the taste of youth. When she placed the slice in front of him, John was almost thrown off balance. It wasn't about the cake itself, but the memory it carried. They ate in silence, but the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was a silence full of memory. On the third day, Mary did something even simpler. She sat beside him in the living room and asked how his day had been. His answer was short, as usual. But noticing she stayed there, just listening, John felt something shift inside him. It was as if the space between them had begun to shrink. These small gestures created little stories within their big story. A note, a cake, attentive listening. Each act had a beginning, middle, and end, but left seeds for the next day. Mary's mind filled with good memories, and John's began to organize around something he thought he'd forgotten: sharing life. On the fourth day, though, the first crack appeared. While sorting through a drawer, John found old letters. Some he remembered, others carried words he no longer recognized in himself. Among them was an undelivered letter, describing a time when Mary felt lost in their marriage. He stood frozen before those lines, as if the floor beneath him had turned fragile. He put the letter back, but his heart carried that weight. When Mary noticed his closed-off expression that night, she tried to start a conversation. John turned away. The challenge that had seemed promising now turned into tension. It was as if, in just 4 days, those gestures had reopened a chest full of memories neither of them was sure they were ready to face. Mary waited for the right moment. The 5th day of the challenge had arrived, and her heart felt tight, as if each beat warned her she could no longer hide. As John settled into his armchair, she took a deep breath and said what she'd held inside for years. The words came out trembling. "There was a time I thought about giving up on our marriage." The silence that followed wasn't ordinary. John stared at the wall for a few seconds, as if searching for support in something solid. He hadn't expected to hear that, not from the woman who'd stood beside him through so many battles. His mind spun between memories, questions, and a bitter sting of surprise. Mary kept going. She told him she'd felt alone during important phases, that the lack of conversation left her unmoored. She didn't want to hurt him, but the truth needed to come out. She'd carried that weight for years, and the 14-day challenge gave her the courage. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face, her voice breaking with every sentence. John could have stood up, shouted, or shut himself off in pride. But he didn't do any of that. He simply reached out and took her hands. For a few moments, Mary's tears fell onto his fingers, and that's when he finally spoke. "If you stayed, it's because you believed in us. Now it's my turn to believe too." That answer didn't erase the pain of the revelation, but it completely changed its weight. Mary cried more, but this time with relief. The secret she'd guarded for so long had found shelter instead of rejection. In that moment, the couple felt something old had died, and something new was beginning to be born. John realized Mary's mind, so often overloaded by silence, had been asking for space to breathe. And by opening himself to listen, he felt his own mind clear. It was as if that confession had swept away layers of dust hiding what love still remained. That night ended differently from all the ones before. No notes or desserts, but with a silent pact, to face together whatever was still ahead. The fifth day, which could have led to a breakup, instead became the turning point that would change the rest of the challenge. After Mary's revelation, the atmosphere between them shifted. It was no longer about completing a challenge, but about rediscovering who they were to each other. On the sixth day, Mary played an old song on the radio, and John pulled her to dance. Their bodies didn't move like they used to, but laughter filled the room as if time had rolled back a few decades. On the seventh day, John dared to cook her favorite dish. The kitchen ended up a mess, but Mary saw in it the dedication she'd so often missed. That imperfect effort tasted better than any flawless meal. The eighth and ninth days followed the same tone: notes, memories, long conversations, each one a small step toward renewed closeness. On the 10th day, an old photograph appeared. Mary found it in a drawer, the two of them, still young, smiling as if the future were an endless promise. They stared at it for a long time and laughed at themselves, realizing that despite the marks of time, what truly mattered was still there. On the 11th day, Mary took the initiative to do something symbolic. She brought back an old notebook she used to write down dreams. She sat beside John and wrote on the first blank page, "Our dream now is to live lightly." He, moved, added a line, and with the courage to start over every single day. It was the first time in years they had built a written promise together. On the 12th day, John surprised her in an even simpler way. Before bed, he placed an envelope on her nightstand. Inside was a short letter: "Thank you for not giving up on us." Mary cried quietly as she read it, and that night, she fell asleep with the feeling that her voice had finally been heard. The 13th day arrived full of meaning. John woke up earlier, made coffee, and instead of waiting for Mary, he went to call her himself. When she walked into the kitchen, she found the table set just like in their newlywed days, with flowers in the center. They sat down, and for the first time in a long while, they talked without rushing. They spoke of youth, of their children, of their grandchildren, and realized there was still so much left to live. After completing the 14 days, John and Mary understood that the greatest secret wasn't just in the notes, the letters, or the little surprises, but in the daily care they gave to their own minds. Mental health was the quiet foundation that supported every gesture, every conversation, every reconciliation. It was as if everything they had experienced was only possible because they chose to make space for clear thinking and the emotional lightness they had long thought they'd lost. John realized the years had hardened him with silence and worry. His mind, heavy with unresolved memories, had caused him to shut down, believing he had nothing new left to offer. When he learned to organize those thoughts and give voice to what he felt, he rediscovered that love needs room to breathe. Mary, for her part, realized that anxiety and the weight of old frustrations had made her see marriage as a burden. By releasing those feelings, she found relief and strength to look at John with tenderness once again. The mental balance they sought together gave shape to the love that had seemed faded. It wasn't magic, it was a daily choice. Sleeping better, speaking more calmly, truly listening, appreciating small things. Each of these strengthened not only their relationship but also how they saw themselves as individuals. When the mind finds peace, the heart can hold affection without getting lost in the noise. In the end, it became clear that simply being together physically wasn't enough. They needed to be fully present, in body and mind. Marriage after 60 isn't strengthened by time or routine alone, but by the conscious decision to care for mental health, because it's the root of lasting love. John and Mary discovered that by clearing their thoughts and making space for what truly matters, love blooms again, strong, renewed, and ready to carry them through any stage of life. This channel is new and was created to inspire and show, through stories like John and Mary's, that it's possible to live with balance, courage, and gratitude at any age. Subscribe and stay with us on this journey.